Normally during this time, if this was a normal weekday, Penn Avenue here, right out in front of our RCC building, would be packed with people getting ready to eat. These restaurants are normally really crowded, and this has happened over the last maybe 8 years or so, that West Reading became this hub of all these great restaurants on Penn Avenue that range from all kinds of different nationalities, from Vietnamese food to Thai food to Mexican food to Mediterranean food to microbreweries, from farm to table to cafes, you name it. Pretty much everything is right here. And as staff, RCC staff, we've gotten a little spoiled to be able to walk right outside our office doors and walk a few feet and have any choice of whatever food we wanted. These places represent all kinds of diverse food, and they represent food that is exciting, and they represent obviously places that nourish our bodies. Today, this is the start of a brand new series that we're doing called the Beloved series. And this series focuses on the love of God and the many diverse expressions of the love of God, and how that love of God nourishes both our spiritual beings and our emotional beings. But even more than that, this series focuses on the necessity of the knowledge of the love of God, how food is essential for our physical bodies. This love of God is absolutely essential if we are to ever live what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. Living the life that Jesus calls us to live is actually impossible without this knowledge of the love of God for us. In Matthew 5, 6, and 7, Jesus talks about the fact that he did not come to abolish the law, the Ten Commandments, and nor did he come to abolish the words of the prophets, but he actually came to fulfill those. And then he starts off there, and then he launches into like his new commandments that he's giving. But Jesus doesn't just talk about what not to do, as the Ten Commandments does. He talks about what we are to do, how we are to live as members of this kingdom, as people that have been redeemed by him, as his followers. And so he basically takes an axe and goes at the root of human evil, of human darkness. And he goes into talking about not even having anger toward other people, about forgiveness, about turning the other cheek if someone slaps the other one, about even loving our enemies. Like, these are things, I don't know about you personally, but if I'm honest, I'm not living those things well. If someone slaps my cheek, I'm not likely to turn and let them slap the other cheek. I don't know how great I'm doing at loving my enemies and wanting to bless them. I don't know how great I'm doing at forgiving those that need forgiveness, or those that I'm called to forgive. And so a lot of people start to assume, well, Jesus basically took the Ten Commandments and elevated them to such a point that they're absolutely impossible. So why would Jesus do that? Well, a lot of people think that Jesus does that so that we could see how miserable we are at keeping the heart of God, and so that we understand our need for forgiveness. And that's the whole reason that Jesus talks about these almost impossible ideals for the way we should live in relationship with one another in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. I don't think that's true. I think Jesus elevates this and talks about the way we are to live as his followers, so that we can come face to face with our need, not for forgiveness, but for transformation. We are supposed to be transformed in our heart and in our minds with the knowledge of the love of God. And if you read in the beginning of Matthew 5, Jesus begins with what we famously call the Beatitudes. And he says things like, if we were to read it in today's language, that would say something like, blessed are you if you are at the end of your rope. Blessed are you if you feel spiritually bankrupt. And all of these other things that he talks about, there were people that were outcast, people that were neglected, people that were judged to not be worthy of God. Jesus basically starts off this Sermon on the Mount by bringing the kingdom to these people and saying the kingdom of God is theirs. What does that mean? Before Jesus talks about how we are to live, he talks about how we are accepted. And then he says, you are the light of the world. He talks about his followers. You are the light of the world, and that people will see your works and they will glorify his Father which is in heaven. So not only does he start by accepting us, he also chooses us for his glory and for his purposes. And only with that understanding, can you then turn around and begin to live the way that he tells us to live. But it starts with that understanding of his acceptance and his choosing of us. Jesus didn't just talk about these things. Jesus actually lived these things and practiced these things. Think about his interactions with people in the Gospels. He was always showing love and forgiveness and healing and wholeness to those that the religious culture thought were out. So Jesus always started by saying, you're in, you're forgiven. You have a purpose with me. And then he talks about going and sinning no more. Then he talks about living this life that we're supposed to live for him. And so this knowledge of God's acceptance, of God's choosing, of God's love for us, of his rich, diverse, nourishing love for us is the way we live the Christian life. There is no other way to live the Christian life. It starts here and it begins here and it continues here throughout our Christian existence. The life that Jesus calls us to live is actually impossible without this kind of knowledge. Without trying to be too dramatic about it here, I would say that the Christian life is really impossible unless it's rooted in this knowledge of the deep, nourishing, ever-living love of God for who we are. When I was a young adult in my Christian faith, I became somewhat disenfranchised pretty quickly with Christianity, and I felt like I was in a performance trap. As a matter of fact, at the age of 19, I was leading a youth ministry, I was leading a young adult ministry, I was leading a kids' church ministry, I was preaching on occasion, and I had a business, and I felt like I had to do everything a particular way to be so pleasing to God and to be pleasing to other people. I began to break out in hives all over my face. I began to, my lips began to swell. And I remember one day I went to the doctor. The doctor said, I have no idea. You don't seem to be allergic to anything. And one day I swelled up so much that my brothers thought I looked hysterically funny. They took pictures of me. I wasn't sick, but I had some kind of bad reaction. I went to the doctor again and he just asked, are you under a lot of stress? And I realized that I was, and it all had to do with my relationship with God. I was trying so hard to be the kind of person that I thought God wanted me to be, and the kind of leader I thought God wanted me to be, and the kind of Christian and brother and husband and all the rest. And I realized right away, this is not going to work. I'm not even 20 years old. I'm going to have a nervous breakdown. And I could not live with that kind of mentality anymore. So I learned by reading a lot of the Christian mystics and get into the Word of God and seeing all the different verses about the love of God, I learned what it means to really base my identity in the love of God. And this is something that I return to over and over and over again. This is why I spend time with Him alone. I want to be with Him. I want to hear His word. I want His voice. I want to know His love, because this is the basis for my entire existence. And I have to be really honest with you, church, at this point. I think sometimes I've preached entire sermon series that are impossible to fulfill, impossible to live without this knowledge of the love of God. So I think I take for granted sometimes that everybody understands that you've got to base your existence in Him on this love of God. Like, that's step number one. But I realize that's not really true. A lot of people don't really know that. And if you try to fulfill what Christ is asking you to fulfill in your relationships and all of these things, and even trying to do some of the stuff I say in some of my sermons without basing it all on the love of God, you've got legalism, or you've got hypocrisy, or you've got something that basically makes you feel like it's impossible. And so you learn to separate yourself, your existence, from your Christian life. So this really matters, even right now, because some of you dealing with stuff being at home, maybe stuck indoors with family 24/7, or some of you have young kids, or maybe some of you are living with older relatives, or whatever it may be, or even if you're living by yourself, you're noticing these emotions that are coming to the surface, and you don't know what to do with them. Maybe you've had moments of explosions, maybe you've had moments in which you feel utterly depressed, or in which you feel completely just not able to function well. And so in those times, we don't operate very lovingly, maybe, toward our loved ones. Perhaps we become very insulary and focused on ourselves and what we're dealing with. And so this matters. Like, what we're talking about here really matters, not just in the grand scope of Christianity, it matters here and now also. And beyond that, we begin to think of like the series that we just finished last month, Higher Love series, and how we are called to a higher love, to love those that are not just like us, that don't look like us, that don't think like us, right? We're called to love these people as Jesus would have loved, as Jesus would have brought the good news through His love and through His actions. We're called to do the same. And all of this, living the way we're supposed to live in our relationships, living the way we're supposed to as His church, none of it is possible without this starting place of His love for us and understanding that we are His beloved. And so that's why this series was born. It's born out of this need for all of us to base our existence in His love. And so over the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at different aspects of what it means to be the beloved of God. We're going to look at what it means to be chosen by Him, accepted by Him, and also adopted by Him, because this is the language that the Bible uses. What does it mean to be adopted by Him? For Him to be our parent, and what does it mean to be adopted into the family of God also? So we're going to be looking at these different aspects, and we're going to be looking at a lot of different verses that talk about God's love for us. And all of it is a powerful truth, but it's only powerful if you spend the time to really wrestle with it, see if there's something in you that doesn't believe it, surrender that to God, and then really once and for all open your heart wide open to be able to receive this incredible love that He has for us. I believe this series can actually be one of those series that is life-changing. And I do not say those kinds of things very often. You know that about me. I'm not a sensationalist. But I do believe that for some of you who have yet to let the love of God to come in and transform your hearts, you will be a different person as you begin to learn and really let this existence of God's love for you begin to sink in. And when we talk about the love of God, we're not talking about some feel-good, romantic, happy kind of, again, pie in the sky kind of idea. When you read the philosophies or you read other world religions, or certainly in a lot of pop culture today, there is so much talk of love and trying to understand what love is. And when you read psychology books and philosophy books, a lot of them end up just saying, love is a mystery. We really can't put it into words, and yet we know that it's essential to our being. but we can't really describe what it is. Well, as believers, we can describe what love is, because the Bible says that God is love. That is our definition. God is love. Now, that's not the same, though, as saying that love is God. You see, in our day and age, because we know we have such a need for the love of God, or for love in general, love has become preeminent. Love has become paramount. We elevate love sometimes above God. To say that love is God is to elevate love above God. And this is dangerous, of course, because then you and I define what love is, right? And we don't look outside of ourselves for what love is. And so we're in danger of making God in our own image. But when we say instead that God is love, then actually what we're saying is that all love comes from Him, and He alone defines what love is. We don't define what love is, He does. And so our great need is not actually for love. Our greatest need is for God. And thankfully, God is love. And so all love comes from Him and flows from Him. And because He created us to be in relationship with Him, we find exactly what our souls need, the very nourishment that we need in our emotions and in our spiritual being. And as we are nourished in this love, again, we begin to change our perspective, because we begin to have all that we need. When we, in a few weeks, talk about adoption and how God adopts us, this is very personally relevant, because we have friends, and you may have friends, and we have people in our church that have adopted others. And the idea that we belong to the Creator God, I mean, talk about a parent, right? The Creator God, and He's not a bad adopted parent. He's a really good adopted parent. He adopts us and loves us and gives us exactly what we need. I've seen families in which parenting style is exactly the same. They love their kids equally. They love their kids abundantly and unconditionally. And one child grows up with the knowledge of this love and is able to be very generous with their life, and is able to be very giving with all that they do, and operates from a place of security. And another child with the same exact parents will grow up with bitterness, without feeling that they have that love, and they are broken in their estimation of themselves, and they're broken in their estimations of the world, and they're not able to love as God would have them to love, because they're so focused on their own wounds. The love of God is the same toward you as it is toward me, as it is toward anybody in the Bible that we could think of. The difference is us. The difference is deciding here and now to open ourselves up for the full love of God, for that to be our knowledge, for that to be our experience, to stop giving all the reasons as to why God doesn't love us, because those are lies. And we're at the point where we must exchange our truth for His truth. Who He says we are is that you and I are the beloved. This is ground zero. This is where it all starts. And church, I invite you over the next few weeks to go on this journey with me, to know once and for all, without a question, no matter what our feelings say, no matter what our circumstances say, we are the beloved of God. And the cross and the resurrection of Jesus proves that to us. Before we jump into a closing song together in worship with Dan and Lauren, it's so great to have them lead worship with us. We're going to put a few verses up on the screen for you to meditate on concerning the love of God. And be honest with yourself at this point and see if you really believe this for yourself. And if not, talk to God about that. Begin to open your heart and really receive this redefining love of our Creator once and for all. Bless you, church.